Thank you for joining us today. The session here is Increasing Mid-Level Revenue with AI Agents, the Mid-Level Revolution. My name is George Whalen. I'm with Moore, Chief Client Development Officer. I've been with the organization now for 6 years and looking forward to this conversation. I'll pass it on to Eva.
Thanks, George. Hi, everyone. I'm Eva Volandis, and I am the lead for the nonprofit industry strategy at Microsoft Elevate. I've been in this role for about 5 weeks right now, but I've been with Microsoft for about 4.5 years. And I will hand it over to John.
Hi, I'm John. I'm the Willy Wonka at the Children's Hospital of Philadelphia, answering the question of how does technology advance philanthropy? And I've been with CHOP for about 6.5. Danielle?
Thanks, John. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Danielle Dinsford. I'm with Dare to Care Food Bank. I have been food banking for the last 7 years. Before I was fundraising, I was food raising, and now work with our individual mid-level supporters. It is so good to be with you all today.
Thank you, guys. Great team we have assembled here today. As we get started, I just wanted to cover a little bit of what we're going to be talking about in brief agenda. Going to do a very brief overview of how AI works generally. Then Ava's going to talk about Microsoft Elevate and their approach to AI. John's going to cover CHOP and using AI and data together and how it's helped with our modeling has helped with, performance. And then kind of an evolution on data where we democratization of AI. And I'll talk more about that as we move forward. That will be handled by Danielle with Dare to Care and the Accelerate solution. So I'm going to be brief. There's 3 main flavors of AI today. You've got predictive modeling, which is machine learning. It's been around for decades. It's where a lot of the modeling is built. And we're going to be focusing primarily on mid-level today, though you can build models for just about anything, but the focus was on mid-level and AI for this particular webinar. Then you've got generative AI, which is more of the broader, the chat GPTs, the Claude, the Microsoft's Copilot of the world and so forth. And then agentic, which is kind of the new thing. And we'll talk a little bit about that. Won't have much to do with the presentation today until the very end, but it kind of gives you an overview of what we're doing. So there's going to be one consistent theme throughout this entire presentation, and that is data. The better the data, the better all of the modeling, all of the functionality around AI is going to work. So starting from a machine learning perspective, we're looking at one individual donor. Most organizations will know your name, an address, perhaps a phone number, an email. Within Simio and most organizations that have a co-op like Simio, we have all of the US households in our system. We layer on top of that philanthropic data, which we'll talk about in a second. We layer demographic data. We layer political data. We layer all kinds of third-party information that's thrown in there that creates a profile, an identity graph of those individuals. And it's kind of the philanthropic giving. There's over 2 billion transactions within Simio's co-op, philanthropic transactions, and there's over 800 organizations that participate in it. That kind of leads to the philanthropic giving part of that. So a great idea of what this looks like. Organization might have the information on the left, Marcy Tate, where she lives, got an email address. Simio Cloud has all of that information plus Marcy's work address, plus her 3 prior addresses, her giving to 8 charities, recent giving, totaling almost $20,000, an IP address, mobile phone, all of that information, which helps round out the individual. And as modeling is built, the more that information we have, the better the models are going to be. So what does that modeling look like? This is just a sample. Most organizations that build models will do different ways of doing tiers and everything else. Within Simio, it's tiers 1 through 20, with tiers 1, 2, and 3 being the ones you focus on the most. Those are the most likely to perform a specific action. Be that upgrade to mid-level, become a major gift donor, become a sustainer, all depending on what the desired goal is for the model to identify. And how does this help? Well, this is a sample organization that uses our modeling, and you can see where the increase is looking at donor journeys and being able to put messages that are right for the donors at the right time based on their prior giving as well as all of their other information. You can see examples like 1,000% increase in upgrading to major donor, an 800% increase to mid-level, and 174% increase of upgrading within mid-level. These are the kind of results where when you're targeting the right people with the right message and the right offer, you get these kinds of results. So that is the machine learning early parts of AI. When you get into generative, most people think of what this looks like. ChatGPT, Claude, Microsoft's Copilot, Gemini, all of these solutions that help you with messaging, help you with creative, help you with video feeds, things like that. It's that and kind of much more. And I'm only going to focus on one example here because it's worth one. I want to let the speakers get into their parts of the presentation, but where generative AI is really useful for just from a digital perspective alone is one example. Banners. You can see the imagery here where the images on the left are the actual images. The generative AI takes those images. We want them for a banner. It'll expand the artwork. That can be done for videos. It can be done for creative copy. All of these different areas where you're instructing the solution to take an action to benefit whatever you're doing within a campaign or within any kind of effort. Where it gets interesting now is agentic. So this has less human involvement and more ongoing direction. So the AI takes action here to achieve specific goals. In the case of Sophia, which is a agent within Simio, it's to take a support ticket and pull together the data. It helps with where do I find this? Where is this within our system? And it really functions as a digital sidekick that is there to help support based on tasks it's been assigned. The keys to it, when you think about AI, it's data. Define the actions your agent's going to complete. Identify the top tasks they're going to be doing. Who are they going to be interacting with? And all of the sources of data. What do they need? How fresh does data have to be? How often does it have to be refreshed? What are triggers? What are the frequency that they're going to be looking at? All of that plays a role in how the agentic AI will work for you and the agentic AI agent. With that, I'm going to pass this on to Ava and Microsoft.
I love that robot there. It started reminding me of a lot of movies. Hi, everyone. I am so happy to be here with you today. I talked a little bit about what I do at Microsoft Elevate, but before at Microsoft Elevate, I spent a lot of my career inside nonprofits, including leading corporate partnerships at UNICEF USA and later driving social impact at Minecraft. So when I talk about the challenges that nonprofits face, it's from firsthand experience. Managing the funding pressures, the operational constraints, and the constant need to prove impact with limited resources. And that's why I was excited to join Microsoft Elevate. The access to technology and the opportunity it creates is still uneven. And if we don't address that, those gaps are going to widen. Microsoft Elevate exists to help close those gaps by strengthening education, workforce, and social impact systems. So for nonprofits, that means building AI capability so that you can better serve communities and keep pace with change. Now, at a practical level, our focus is to help overstretched teams get the right information to the right people so that they can make better decisions. And that means reducing fragile manual work, things like disconnected systems and slow reporting and lost institutional knowledge, and replacing it with something that is more reliable and usable. Our key principle is that AI doesn't create impact on its own, but that people do. AI should support human judgment and not replace it. People stay accountable for the decisions, for the relationships, and how the work gets done. You'll hear the term agentic AI today, so I wanted to ground us in this. A lot of nonprofits are already experimenting with AI, but far fewer have a real strategy in place, and that's the gap. Because agentic AI is going to help close that by supporting that multi-step work. So imagine I was in fundraising, so things like identifying the donors, then drafting the outreach, and then tracking the follow-up, all in a structured and repeatable way. Not in a one-off experiment, but how the work actually gets done. And all of this work only works if it's trusted. And in nonprofits, as many of you know, you can't move fast and break things when you're handling things like donor and beneficiary data. Systems have to be secure, they have to be transparent, and they have to be accountable. Here at Microsoft, we build on responsible AI foundation. That means including fairness, reliability and safety, privacy and security, inclusiveness, transparency and accountability with a clear principle that your data stays your data. This matters to me because I have lived it. At UNICEF USA, our teams worked incredibly hard, but sometimes with fragmented tools. not because we didn't want better, but because the solutions weren't built for our reality. And what's changed is that the level of intelligence that used to require major investment is now becoming accessible. That's an equity of capability moment and a big part of why I came to Microsoft. So to bring it together, nonprofits don't need more technology, they need more capacity to serve communities, maintain trust, and keep operating as conditions change. And that's why we're working toward this. And what you're about to see next is going to be an exciting and I believe a very strong example of that in action. And now I'm going to pass it over to John.
Yeah, thanks, Ava. So I'm John with the Children's Hospital of Philadelphia. CHOP was actually the nation's first children's hospital. We employ around about 30,000 people, and 200 of which are at the foundation, and we're raising a skosh less than $200 million a year for our run rate. One of the existential business problems that nearly all the children's hospitals have is that the ratio of FTEs to what people are bringing in has been pretty well locked. It's around $1 million per FTE is what most of the foundations in the children's hospital spaces are doing. The problem with that is that the need for philanthropic dollars is greater than ever. We've got shifting expense reimbursements from the federal government, but also the needs for research to pioneer new cures and approaches. At the same time, we have found that 4 out of 10 of our $1 million donors start off giving us $100 or less. And we have also found that donors who interact with multiple programs actually have a multiplying effect to their lifetime value. So all of those things collectively made us start thinking differently about how do we build and advance our pipeline so that we have a more sustainable philanthropic operation for our industry. Now, most of us start off building our pipeline through wealth. If you have money, we're your buddy. But anybody who's been in this game long enough knows that just because somebody is wealthy does not necessarily that they intend to give their money to you or that they're attached to your cause. So we first sought out to measure how people are attached to us. And we started fairly simply with kind of that old Excel spreadsheet approach of doing some kind of weighted regression. So if you came in for cancer treatment, you were probably more attached than if you came in for a sports injury, just kind of based upon the severity of the disease. We started off with 4 data points kind of around that, but the problem with 4 data points is it doesn't really give you a picture of who the person is or their interaction with us. So we had to actually scale up to hundreds of data points. Starting on the grateful family side, it's yes, severity of disease, how far are you driving in to get to us? Their clinical mix, so on and so forth. But that also pertains true for your experience or your attachment interacting with us as a foundation. How long have you been on the file? Is you're going up, down, sideways? Are you interacting with multiple programs, so on and so forth? All of this can give us a fingerprint of your attachment, but we needed to lean on ML and big data and AI to help us synthesize through all of that to give us kind of a stoplight of your attachment. During this process, I happened to be watching DuckTales with my daughter, and Scrooge McDuck was hit by a car. And it occurred to me at this time that Scrooge McDuck is both wealthy and attached to the hospital, but he's still a bad duck. He doesn't care to give. And so we had to come up with some way of modeling the psychology. Are you psychologically the type of person who wants to get philanthropically involved? And with that, we had to turn to the Simio team. Simio is collecting tens of thousands of data points against every adult in the country. And we were able to create these lookalike models to say that you are the type of person who wants to give, but even getting further into that, you are psychologically the type of person through an event or through planned giving or major giving and all of these different giving vehicles. So it is now the nexus of all of these scores that we use to build our pipeline. So on top of that, we then start giving scores of where are you at in your moves management or your journey with us. Based upon all of the various data points that we know and how you're interacting, how you're talking with people, we're able to come up with some statistical probability that you will give more today than you would 2 weeks from now. So we should move forward with this, or we should tee up some other type of information to help move you along with moves management. This actually is driven even further by kind of listening bots that we have on our website and our digital communication channels that help us figure out who you are. So who is Jane Doe, this Jane Doe, and not another Jane Doe? This Jane Doe is interested in these content sets, and this Jane Doe happens to be more engaged today than she was yesterday. So we combine this with channel attribution, essentially the idea that nothing happens in a vacuum. As a business, we often rely on way too simplistic understandings of an ROI. Somebody got an email and it said, please give me money, and that person did or they did not, and that's the ROI of email. But we know that nothing happens in that vacuum, that they got that email, but they also got a mail piece, saw like a TV ad, or heard a radio ad, drives by a billboard every day, and sees social media ads, so on and so forth. We've come up with a mathematical way to model all of that, to be able to assign out an ROI of how all of that works together. But what gets even more interesting is we're able to prescribe that specifically to Jane Doe. That Jane Doe, we know, will resonate best with these touch points in this order, but John Doe will resonate with those touch points in those orders. So we can individualize all of that. Kind of what's behind all of this is a Markov 3 model. And if you know what I'm talking about when I say a Markov 3, you should hook up with me on LinkedIn. We have so much to talk about what we could do together in this industry. So this is the psychographic profile. This is essentially what are the value sets that are resonating with you. So are you looking for a sense of belonging? Are you responding to insecurities? Are you responding out of financial strength versus weakness versus something else? What are the motivators inside your behavior? One of the best places to get this information is actually through the online advertising industry. They are one of the best acquirers of big data that is specific to your psychological motivation. And you can often negotiate this information in exchange for ad buys of a certain size. That actually really helps us get prescriptive with some of our outreaches. I'm going to talk in a bit about how we apply all of this to marketing automation, but even this information alone, when we have virtual town halls like this, we actually create this type of graph for everybody who attends, and we give it to the gift officer who follows up so that the gift officer knows what kind of tone and value statement to use when introducing themselves to somebody. So it's just a great example of kind of the power of which big data can provide a lot of us in our business. So this is actually where the rubber starts meeting the road. So if you think about attachment and psychology, the other ways to think about that is attachment also can dictate interest. Psychology also helps inform tone and syntax in an outreach. Wealth helps inform which are the programs that we offer up to people. Obviously, the channel attribution recommends which individual giving vehicles, and the psychology helps us knowing which ways to pivot. Are we aggressive? Are we not aggressive? Do we need to lightly warm up? So on and so forth. We're able to aggregate all of that information, and we built a content library with the specific purpose of teaching an LLM, how do we talk? What do we talk about? What are all of the vehicles? So that we can aggregate all of the various things that I just talked about and start putting together an outreach with an N of 1, or essentially marketing automation that is highly specific to change the scale of a gift officer, so that a gift officer no longer has to worry about what do I need to reach out and when do I need to reach out with. We can have a system that says the statistical probability says that Jane Doe will most likely convert if we reach out to her on this topic over these channels with this tone and syntax, and we're going to make it so, or we're going to invite her to this event, and we can then layer in the gift officer because she will be that much further along in moves management if we have a human conversation. So all of that collectively together, yes, it's technology, yes, it's innovation, but it's about solving a business problem. And our business problem is that we need to help our gift officers and our philanthropic programs scale in ways that they never could before because of all of the back-end work that it requires. But we're also able to lean in to give Jane Doe a better experience because we are seeking to understand who she truly is and give her the opportunity to lean in with us. And so that's really what AI and big data tees up for us. So how are we doing?
We have a question in the chat specific to this Grateful Families piece, John, from Trish. How do you ensure HIPAA compliance using this big data approach in these AI tools?
Unfortunately, my parents were right. I should have gone to law school. Who would have thought that studying computer engineering would have been the dead end, that the people part is actually the hard part of all of this. So there are lots of ways through that. So the attachment modeling that I spoke to previously, there are lots of data points in that I, as a fundraiser, am not allowed to know. But I am allowed to know what those data points in aggregate point to. So we have the system communicate from Epic, which is our medical CRM, to the scoring tools. It aggregates it all together, and it essentially gives a stoplight. This allows what is behind the data to stay private, but for us to be a beneficiary of what all of that data says in aggregate. Other places that we lean into is that deterministic identity resolution tends to run afoul of an awful lot of newer privacy regulations. So California, Colorado, New Jersey, they're all leaning into kind of various forms of privacy. We've been investing in probabilistic, which actually has kind of a dependency on big data again. And the idea behind probabilistic is that there's always this shadow of a doubt. So in my case, give me all of the John Thompsons in the United States. That's this pile. Okay, now give me all of the John Thompsons in Philadelphia. That's a smaller one. Give me all of the John Thompsons in Philadelphia that are male, the smaller, so on and so forth. You just keep nesting those data points. Each of the stripe of it in and of itself doesn't violate any HIPAA or privacy laws, but in aggregate, when you lean on the law of big numbers, it allows you to zoom in on the person of one. Other kind of things behind it all is obviously when somebody starts interacting philanthropically and not necessarily through the medical establishment, that gives us a little bit more grace to know or understand about people. And then, quite frankly, we all talk about that Amazon experience, but there's an opportunity to allow people to self-opt into a certain degree of data tracking and what they provide to you, because they want you to know what their relationship is with you and the cause, because they want you to meet them where they're at. Keeping track of that data isn't necessarily a problem. Using it in an unethical way and without permission is kind of the core issue. And so we find lots of ways to facilitate getting that permission or finding certain other paths that have that shadow of a doubt. I hope that kind of answers the question in the most time-sensitive manner. So how are we doing? Essentially, that our median average gift size for in the major giving space has doubled over the course of our interaction with all of this. We started our pilots with this around 21, doing it individualized by program, but we have since around 24 have made this how we do nearly everything at the foundation. So in and of that our kind of average first major gift size is up by nearly $500,000. This particular slide also talks a little bit about velocity, but the next slide talks about it even better, which is the time to close a gift or the time to move somebody through moves management. So velocity in which we move people through our sales program, our philanthropic program, has had this exponential improvement. That allows us to get more gifts and engage with more people faster, utilizing less resources than ever before. And this is what I think is truly the magic. So yes, it's great that we're getting more dollars when we're talking to people, but people are engaging with us at the rate in which we can really interact with more people, break out of that inherent business problem of only being able to manage 100 relationships at a time per gift officer. So we even kind of break this out. Our scoring systems kind of help us separate out by the degree of attachment. And you really kind of see that average gift size being incredible in that highly attached standpoint, and then it tears down from that. The only thing that kind of looks funny is the not attached. And really what you're seeing there is that if they're truly not attached, then we probably don't have the data on them to be able to rate that they might have interest. Good example of that is, let's say somebody was a patient 20 years ago and they decide that they're in a position to give a big thank you gift later on. We don't necessarily know that they were a patient 20 years ago. And so we kind of have to lean on self-identification for that. And then again, this is kind of going back to that view on velocity, but essentially that the highly attached are really moving through moves management exponentially faster than somebody in different tiering. This really helps us focus our efforts in on the people who are ready to move, and then lean on marketing automation to either warm up or predispose people who aren't quite ready for that secret sauce that a gift officer or program can offer. This is response rate. And so this is actually both inclusive of annual giving all the way up through major giving. But essentially, we've taken our response rates from being around 1 to 2% all the way up to 7 and 8%. So even the outreach that we're sending out in the marketing automation and our mass communication channels is having an exponentially higher impact than it would have without any of the various scoring systems. So one of the things, just to kind of sum up my area as a whole, is we, as a fairly large, robust philanthropic enterprise, we had the resources to build out lots of custom technology. We were able to partner with lots of other agencies that had their own, such as the Moore and the Simio team. But even with all of the custom work and thought that it had to go into it, we actually paid off our investment in the first year because of all of these stats. And so really, we think that we are inventing kind of a new form of philanthropic strategy by leaning on big data and technology to help us be more efficient and to talk to people where they're at in their relationship, and being able to do that through a data-driven way. So I think that's it for me.
Yeah. We do have a couple of questions in the chat. One is from a tech person, Philip, who asks, "Can you explain what moves management is?"
Yeah, moves management is essentially a kind of an industry sales process that a large part of the philanthropic industry uses. So kind of the idea that you've got to qualify and then you got to move somebody to the next step. And over the course of that moves management, that's how you take them from being an unknown person or just somebody on a call sheet to somebody who is actually given a philanthropic gift. And in the major giving space, that moves management process tends to take about 18 to 24 months. So the fact that we are talking about the velocity changes that we are means that we're shrinking from 2 years to inside of a single fiscal year. So it's kind of this really exceptional sales process to it all.
And we actually have a question from Andrew about that velocity. In terms of velocity to first major gift, are we to understand that the time to close the gift has dropped to less than 60 days on average, down from about 2 years?
In some cases, yes. Again, that's a foundation-wide view, and so not all of that is in the major space, but yes, we have some instances where we've gotten multiple millions of dollar gifts where the person was actually on our file for years, had never done anything, and we had never followed up, and this system recommended that we reach out, and our cancer team did, and they closed a multiple million-dollar gift within 3 months. So it is a very good case statement on how when the data directs you to the right person at the right moment when they are ready, that you can move mountains in a short period of time and really build a mutually beneficial relationship that you can then build upon from there. I kind of think a lot of this stuff is big data is listening. It's just helping us listen at a scale, and AI is helping make sense of all of that for us so we know where to focus in on at those right moments.
Sure. And then we have a question about the process for this from Corey. Does this use causal inference?
In some places, causal, but also correlation, particularly in the big data side of things. I'll kind of poke at Simio for a little bit. The data that Simio has on people is like, how many car garages do you have and your proximity to this power utility or a pothole? What does a pothole being outside of your house have anything to do with philanthropy? But in the law of big data, the correlation, when you see enough of a pattern, it can really help focus you in on that. And so, yes, like attachment and the donor scoring, donor state modeling that I talked about earlier, all of that is causation, but correlation also, we have a bunch of models with that. And that's how all of that kind of comes together, is kind of our secret sauce.
And then a question going back a little bit to Ava, does Microsoft have a database of nonprofits that use Copilot, and how they use it? Is there a way to get introductions to organizations that are using this? And so hopefully right down the center of the plate for you on Microsoft Elevate in your work.
Thank you for the question. We don't have a single public database of nonprofits that are using Copilot that we just share broadly, but we do have a growing ecosystem of customer stories and use cases and partner-led implementations that show how organizations are actually applying it in the real world. One of the things that's been really interesting is how consistent the patterns are. And I think you're hearing a little bit of it right now in how nonprofits are using it. We're seeing things like reducing time spent on reporting and grant writing and improving donor and stakeholder communications and automating those more operational workflows like case management or intake. In terms of how you can actually find those examples, it's usually not in one central place, but there are public stories that are out there. And honestly, the most insightful insights tend to come from real implementations. And that's where partners like More really play an important role because they're much closer to how this shows up day to day, as you can see right now in fundraising and operations. And then from our side, from Microsoft, we help create different kind of curated opportunities, whether it's a briefing or a workshop or connecting organizations who are working on similar problems. So I wish we had a library, but we don't. But there's a great ecosystem, and getting really to the examples that we're actually seeing here and relevant to what you're trying to do, I think are the ways in which we can help connect all of this great work.
And I am going to throw into the chat a link to Microsoft Elevate so you can learn more about it and Microsoft's AI upskilling that may be helpful for you. And then this final question gives us a perfect segue into George briefly and then Danielle. For smaller organizations, in terms of size and budget, what could be implemented now using some of these tools and techniques? And I swear I did not make up this question. Thank you, Elizabeth, for putting it on a tee for us.
So before we jump into this, there was a comment made by John, and I wanted to follow up on modeling and the importance of modeling in this. I'd take it even a step further and say a differentiator within the modeling is also philanthropic behavior when you're dealing with nonprofits. And the best way I can put that, if Danielle and I lived on the same street and we had the same wealth information, we had similar discretionary spending, we looked identical in every single facet, but Danielle gave to 30 charities in the last 24 months, and I gave to none. It's pretty clear who the better candidate is, the better prospect. It's going to be Danielle, not me. And that's where that kind of philanthropic giving is such a differentiator in how a lot of these models are built. We're identifying individuals that don't just have the wealth, but also have the inclination and desire to be philanthropic, have proven that they're philanthropic. Big differentiator. So moving on to a great tee up, Nick, that we got. So large scale modeling, what John is talking about is really in depth. You've got organizations that this kind of modeling has been out of reach for a very long time, either for cost purposes, number of records, all kinds of different factors. And when I mentioned earlier when we started the presentation that we wanted to do something that was basically a democratization of fundraising and being able to bring this down to small organizations with smaller files where they can still have this same kind of impact, but on a smaller scale based on their file size. And I will pass it on to Danielle.
Thank you, George. You all, in so many ways, this is a masterclass in AI and in modeling, and George teed it up so well. I have joked with this group. I am very much the new kid on the block in this lane, but I'm grateful to share with you the experience of a fundraiser. How is someone who is raising money amongst mid-level donors for a mission in the community thinking about and exploring it and using some of these tools? So I want to paint a little context of Dare to Care. I wouldn't be a fundraiser if I didn't start with sharing with you about our mission and work, but just to set the groundwork for the rest of the conversation as we think through how we here in Louisville are exploring some of this. Dare to Care is a mid-sized food bank in the Feeding America network. And we serve neighbors across our southern Indiana and metro Louisville, Kentucky communities. Our work spans about 13 counties here in our regional area. And I won't read these metrics to you that are on the slide, but just to paint a picture, I mean, this work is really furthered in so many ways by an incredible network of community partners, by an army of faithful volunteers, and about 16,000 unbelievably generous donors. And so as we think about that, whether you on this call are from a mid-sized food bank like myself or another mid-sized group, you're a small 1 or 2 person shop, you have the resources and reach of others, what all of us run into, the universal problem is that there are more work than there are hours. There is more responsibilities than there are staff members, right? Ava really led us into that conversation and spoke on that in her topics as well. None of us are strangers to that. And so we at Dare to Care, I'm sure like many of you on this call, are always looking for tools that are going to help us add efficiency and tools that will help us build processes that are automated yet still feel personal. As a fundraiser, that personal element really matters. Am I building processes and am I using tools that are going to equip me to grow relationally with my supporters and with my donors, right? We in the fundraising space hear all the time that our best mid and major giving prospects are already giving to our organization. I am guessing for those of you on this call that I don't have to twist your arm to convince you of that, right? We've experienced that time and time again. We see that, we know it to be true, but the question really becomes, okay, great, so how do I find them, right? And how do I do so strategically? How do I do so thoughtfully? How do I do so relationally with the bandwidth that I have? And so all of that is really the conversation that led Dare to Care and made us so excited to join the pilot with Simio Accelerate. A few things made now the right time for us to say yes, right? Those conversations are ongoing. I have a feeling that they are for many of you who are joining us today. Two other pillars made this the yes, now it's time to explore, made that the real reason why. One, we're at a point here at the food bank where we're really working to grow our mid-level pipeline. We're pouring additional time and resources into this. This has been an intentional effort for us over the last handful of years. And now, thanks to some shifts, a new teammate joining the fold, we'll be able to do even more of that. So timing with that was ideal. The second aspect and pillar is we, like so many of our food bank peers across the country here at Dare to Care, are coming off an unbelievable influx of generosity. Back in the fall, during the government shutdown, when there was a temporary SNAP pause, we had an outpouring of community support. There was a month period where we had over 1,000 new donors come to show up for us, right? Unbelievably beautiful, incredible, heartbreaking, chaotic, everything in between. And so as we think through these conversations that are ongoing, as far as how do we build efficiency, how do we build automated processes to maximize the time we're able to spend growing relationships, as fundraisers, that's what we love to do. How do we say yes now at a time where we want to continue to grow this really faithful group of loyal donors to the food bank? And how do we shepherd well those that have come into our flock? And how do we steward that to maintain a strong annual fund? That is what led us in specifically to say yes to piloting this tool. I'm going to share a little bit more about some of the functionalities, the modeling that we've experienced so far as part of this pilot. I'm going to hand it over to George briefly to introduce us to the dashboard before I jump into that.
Thank you, Danielle. So this solution went live at the end of April. As Danielle mentioned, primarily mid-level, although there's other models involved now, but we're focusing on mid-level today for the conversation. There is major, planned, and donor advised fund and sustainer as well. The solution itself is a relatively easy upload process for data to be inserted into the system, all gifts and all donors. And within 15 to 20 minutes, the data is we have AI agents behind the scenes to match the data to the information we need that you provide. And within 15 to 20 minutes, a model is built. You're not seeing it here, but there's a mid-level model built that will identify how many donors in your file are mid-level donors, for example. There's other factors within the dashboard, political leanings, net worth, giving compared to the co-op, all types of other data assets and information that's great for reporting, great for meetings with boards and with upper management. But the interesting part about it and the useful part about it is the modeling part. And the models themselves will identify for you these individuals who are your best mid-level prospects from your donor file, who are your best major gift prospects from your donor file, who are the best individuals, excuse me, for monthly giving in your donor file that are not currently doing that. That's not the action they're currently taking. It identifies individuals who may be giving $50, $100 to an organization that are capable of giving $1,000 to $10,000. And as John mentioned earlier, knowing that is a big part of the conversation. When you have that information and you're able to see the prior giving to other organizations within the co-op itself, it's anonymous, but within the co-op, what these individuals are giving to other organizations, it gives you the ability to know who to target versus who not to target.
Thank you, George. What you are seeing now is as if you are the fundraiser at your organization who is logging into Simio Accelerate. And this is the Donor Explorer tab where the modeling goes to work for you. George introduced us to this idea. What this is doing is it is ranking and helping prioritize, just as George said, those donors that have the highest likelihood of upgrading. You'll see the normal information found in wealth capacity, net worth, reflected here, income, the engagement that this particular individual has been to your organization. But you've heard time and time again from each of the presenters, the value of seeing not only wealth capacity, but philanthropic. And here in this Donor Explorer tab, as part of the modeling and as part of that ranking, you'll see how much has this individual given to other organizations in the co-op. What's been their maximum gift? How recently did they give another gift? And so to me, as a fundraiser, that makes me excited because as I'm thinking through strategically reaching out to these folks, I feel good about saying, okay, I'm doing this because this person has demonstrated they not only have the capacity to give, but they have the heart to give. It's then my job as the fundraiser to identify, okay, well, how deep is that link to Dare to Care in my case? And is there an opportunity to deepen that? One element that I love about this as well, ease, efficiency. It has a donor ID connecting directly to your CRM. I like this because I am still in the driver's seat, right? This information is presented to me and for me, but then I am able to grab that donor ID, check on these folks as I work through my CRM to say, oh yes, I'm familiar with this person. We already got them on a track. Or as I mentioned earlier, I had thousands of new donors come to my organization in the fall, an unbelievable gift. How do I start to piece through how do I connect with these folks and how do I prioritize it? This is giving me a little deeper indication into who this group is that has joined us. This is a functionality that really made my eyes light up as we think about agentic AI and as we think about maximizing our time as fundraisers, eliminating other tasks that can be eliminated. This made me so excited. As part of Simio Accelerate, what it also offers is a custom donor journey that provides a custom cadence communication plan. When I joined in, AI agent on the back end went to daretocare.org, grabbed information from my website, brought it back and was able to craft a series of communications, put it in a timeline for when I should utilize them to communicate out with the donors I identified in the modeling. It builds out the strategy, the intention, the messaging that aligns directly with, in my case, the work at Dare to Care Food Bank. I always joke, right? It's still not human and we don't need it to be, right? Do a read through, make adjustments, customize it. As I'm going in here and I see this email, you'll see this is a gratitude email, a week one, my first touch with someone I've identified in my modeling who I know that has the ability to upgrade. They're going to get a big old thank you from Dare to Care in a message that is very specific to our work and scope. I'm able to go in, read, add my signature sign off. Instead of with gratitude, I'll put, have a lovely one, Danielle. You'll see in a subject line right there, the standard is thank you for making a difference. At Dare to Care, we tend to lean into language that says thank you for the nourishing difference you make. It takes me 0.2 seconds to make that tweak, right? And then I'm able to send this off. The value that we have seen through exploring this in this pilot is it takes the thinking out of it, right? In the areas that we can remove that. It removes some of that paralysis by analysis, the rabbit trails we can go down and searching through. Who am I going to engage with? What am I going to say? What is the timeline by which I should follow up? With this setup, I know who I'm sending it to, and I feel really good about the strategy of why I've identified those prospects to continue to engage with. I know what I'm sending. And as you can see here, it's a message that's crafted that is missionally aligned, but still able to be customized to be fully my voice and incorporate anything specifically that I want to engage with that donor with or with a group of donors. And then I have a cadence timeline for the next 4 to 6 weeks of how am I going to follow up with this donor with strategic touch points based on what I know. And the value there is just unbelievable. Again, we're early in this process. We joined this pilot here this spring. But what I've appreciated as well about this process is as part of a Dare to Care, we have been able to sit in routine meetings with the team and provide feedback, right? From a fundraiser's perspective, from someone who's utilizing these tools and communicating about it with the team, what functionalities make sense? What functionalities would be useful? What are we intrigued to see? What could we use more of as we think about how do we build this in a way that really serves fundraisers and organizations well? I know this conversation, we've mentioned this a few times already, really centered around mid-level giving, which is near and dear to my heart. But as George said, there's other models that that are available as well as we think through major giving, as we think through donor advised funds, some other functionalities that have come out in conversations through this pilot that are being explored is the ability to do mass email communications, right? So as I've identified a group of donors through this modeling that I want to work this customized donor journey with, I am able to do that in bulk through this email. I didn't mention earlier, but I'll take the opportunity to do it now. These custom emails that you're seeing here on the screen, you'll see in the top right-hand corner, open in Outlook, you can send that through your personal email at work. It doesn't have to come through a system generated. It can, should you choose to, but for me, I like them to see that it's danielle.dinsford@daretocare.org. It's going to look as if any other message would. But the opportunity to do mass email functionality, I think, is an exciting next step, as well as some digital print functionality options as well. So all this to say, again, while we are early, these are the type of things we're thinking about. This is what excites us about these tools, has excited us about being part of this pilot. And what I love about the framework of everybody's talking points today is that it does not remove the people, right? That is essential in this work of fundraising and in this nonprofit space. People are critical. But what it does is it helps us to think through, how are we using tools in the most strategic way to allow us to grow relationally? And that is a really, really neat conversation to be a part of. So thank you all for joining us in this. I know we've got a little bit of time left. I want to leave some time for questions if we have any more that have popped up in the Q&A box as well.
Thank you, everyone. Before you jump into the questions, Nick, just as we close this, there is a QR code here that if anyone's interested, you can follow up and it will lead you to a sign up. There is a no cost for 3 months sign up where you can test the solution out yourself. And we welcome you to give that a try and to reach out to us as well with any questions. And Nick, I'll go to the questions then.
We have a couple of people who have asked this question. Thank you, Keith. And thank you, Angie. What level of transparency do you have with your donor about the data that you're collecting? How do you keep that donor data secure, and how do you communicate with your donors about what data you're collecting and how you're using it?
I can speak to the security part. You have your own instance here, so the data is kept secure and anonymized. It was mentioned before, John had mentioned HIPAA compliance, and more is HIPAA and SOC 2 compliance as well. So the privacy guidelines are very strong. But I'm not sure, Danielle or John, if you have those conversations with your donors or not. It's a good question.
We have privacy notifications and lots of legalese on various websites, for sure. Donors have the ability to opt out of a lot of things, particularly when they are interacting on any kind of transaction form. If they're even a patient, there's opportunity to both opt in and opt out of various scoring systems and whatnot. And then it even changes by state as far as different rules. I think that the point that you made earlier, George, as far as that more is, I guess, a HIPAA compliant shop. Not all tools will sign a BAA that is necessary, but Simeo is one of the very few that is specific to this that will do that. And so that does allow for the sharing of the information that you do have the rights to share for. So hope that helps a little.
Thank you, John.
And then Danielle, you had mentioned that there's a custom cadence that a person can go through. Corinne is asking a great question. What is the custom cadence based on? Is it based on what that donor has requested? Is it based on what folks have seen success with?
Can I jump into that one? Because I'll
Yes.
probably know better than Danielle will.
Please do, George. I was hoping you would.
There are strategies that are built into each different model. So there's an approach to each one that's based on the model, on the vertical of the organization. Is it healthcare? Is it international relief? Is it food bank? I'm throwing a whole bunch out there, but that's the point. And the AI agent will be able to build custom, it's not there yet, but it's coming. We'll be able to build custom models, a custom strategy and a contact strategy, a donor journey specific to each of the different tasks that you're going to try to perform, whether it's upgrading to mid-level or any of the others.
Question from Lilia: is the donor information in the client database used to complete records in the tools and vice versa?
In the tool itself for Simeo Accelerate, yes. If you're referring to joining the co-op, obviously the hope is that the organization join the co-op. But during this 3-month pilot, for example, this 3-month free test, there isn't a need to join the co-op if you don't want to and test the solution out. We obviously hope organizations do join the co-op.
And the co-op is where you get that information.
Is where you
and
get the
give that
philanthropic
information on who's giving to other organizations.
Correct.
Question from Carrie. What is the match rate on average that you see with this tool? So their database is 150,000 donors. What's the match rate they could expect?
I would say it depends on the organization and depends on the model or tool that's being built. When you're looking at mid-level, it's anywhere from 5 to 10% of the 0 to 24 month file. It can be higher, it can be lower, but it usually falls within that 5 to 10% range for mid-level. It's different for each model, but I don't have all those numbers on top of my head. The mid-level ones I know well because we've been focusing on that a lot over the last month.
And then a question, can you measure the ROI of personalizing emails with LLMs, or is it too early in the process?
I do not have an answer for that. We'll have to take that one and get back to you.
We can say that generally the types of personalizations that we're putting in there, even the simple personalizations like you saw with Danielle, we've seen research that personalizing an email with even the location can substantially increase response rate. And so getting to that, trying to get closer and closer to that one-to-one experience that John was talking about, each step in that usually has a positive ROI. We have a couple of questions about if this is just for American nonprofits and do we do this in Canada? And yes, it is currently just for US-based nonprofits.
Correct. It's privacy concerns, data concerns, what you can collect and not collect. It's US-based only right now.
And those are the questions. We have a question from Lilia. Can you share information around pricing after the free 3-month period?
In about 2 weeks, we will be able to. We're still finalizing that. But again, I want to point out to everybody, it literally is a month and a day old. We rolled out the product on April 27th of this year. So there is still a lot going on behind the scenes, hence the 3-month free use. But yes, we'll have that very, very shortly. There have been lots of conversations about that recently.
And whenever I hear something's free, I say, what's the catch? The catch on being this free 3-month period is that we will ask you what you think and how we can improve it. And Danielle is a great example of someone who's brought some great ideas for how we can improve. Pricing will be part of that. We want to make sure that we are delivering to you the value that would make the pricing worth it.
Thank you very much.